Welcome to this edition of Focus, where we look at one of the consequences of the sanctions imposed on Iran. With inflation rampant and some products hard to find, life for many ordinary people there is becoming increasingly difficult. There's also nervousness over the threat of a military strike from Israel. It's a situation which has convinced some Iranians it's time to leave the country, many of them for the former Soviet Union. Last year, some 90,000 Iranians headed for nearby Georgia, 50% more than on the year before. This report from our team in the Georgian capital, Tbilisi.
The food Hamid is making may be typically Iranian, but his restaurant is in Georgia. This is one of the many new eateries in Tbilisi where expat Iranians can get a taste of back home. Hamid left Iran last year. Sanctions there, he says, are making it impossible to do business.
We are free here. We don't get pressure from the police. And my wife isn't forced to wear the Islamic headscarf. These are the freedoms we have here.
But Reza, a Christian preacher from Iran, got more than just pressure from the Iranian authorities. He was jailed for distributing religious literature and spent 40 days in solitary confinement, where, he says, he was tortured and beaten by guards, and one of his legs was broken. He fled to Georgia from Iran a year and a half ago after being released on bail, and knows that if he ever goes back, he'll be sent straight to prison. The members of his congregation who do regularly go back to Iran to visit relatives don't want their identities revealed because they're nervous of the Iranian authorities.
There is fear, in your everyday life, Anytime you can be arrested by intelligence service as a Christian for worshipping, for worshipping God, they can arrest you easily. For example, even at your flat, you're gathering with 5 people.
Connections between Georgia and nearby Iran go back centuries. Manana sells Iranian carpets here in a house which was once a stables for camels carrying goods from Iran. She says Iranians feel at home in Georgia today, not only because they don't need a visa to come here, but also because of historical links between the two cultures, influences which can still be seen in Georgian culture and architecture today.
This is a transit route, and there used to be a Silk Road that went through Georgia. Carpets came from Iran to Georgia and then on to Europe.
But that history also has a dark side. Iran, or Persia as it was then, was once the imperial power which occupied Georgia. So still today, Iran has negative connotations for some Georgians.
It depends where people are from. I don't want Iranians and Indians to come here.
It's better if Europeans come. I prefer European culture and civilization.
But these Iranians say they've been welcomed here. For some of them, pro-Western Georgia is a stepping stone to Europe or the United States, while others say being near enough to Iran to visit relatives makes Georgia itself an ideal home.
For more on this, we can talk to our regional correspondent, Marcus Meyer. Thanks very much for joining us, Marcus. Tell us a little bit more about why Iranians are choosing to leave the country.
Well, economic sanctions imposed by the US and the EU are really hitting the country hard. And so it's getting increasingly difficult to buy certain products, such as medicine from the West. And Iranians I've talked to in Tbilisi say that shelves in some shops in Iran are starting to look pretty empty and products are getting very expensive. And because of the economic problems, inflation is rampant, so people's savings are evaporating. So many of the Iranians who immigrate to Georgia are actually looking to invest their money in, say, property or businesses before their savings become completely worthless. But also, many Iranians say that there's a growing fear of a war over Iran's nuclear program. So by leaving, they're really trying to escape a potential conflict.
And why are they opting for Georgia in particular, do you think?
Well, the main reason is that Georgia is one of the few countries where Iranians can enter without needing a visa, and it's easy for them to get residence permits. Also, it's nearby, so it's just about an hour's flight from Tehran, so it means that it's quick and cheap for Iranians living in Georgia to keep in touch with friends and family who have stayed behind. Georgia is also the most pro-Western and democratically developed country in the region, with strong links to Europe and America. So if it's impossible to get to Europe or the US, Georgia is often seen as the next best thing. Now, historically, there are also a lot of cultural connections between Iran and Georgia. Georgia was once part of the Persian Empire, and you can still see that in architecture and even in the Georgian language, where there are a lot of Persian words. So many Iranians say that they feel very quickly at home in Georgia.
And we saw a little bit about the attitude of some Georgians towards the Iranians in that report. Tell us about some of the problems faced by Iranians in the country.
Well, Georgia's economy is growing, but it's still a very poor country. And according to some estimates, almost half of the population doesn't have any formal employment and scrapes by, for example, by selling homegrown vegetables or fruit in the market. And the jobs that there are very low paid. So Iranians in Georgia very much have to create their own opportunities. Also, as we've seen, they do sometimes face prejudice. Georgia is quite a traditional society, not used to large-scale immigration, and although Georgians tend to welcome migrants from Europe or the States, there is sometimes suspicion about people who come from Muslim countries. And historically, Georgia suffered heavily from Iranian invasions that even culminated in the burning of Georgia's capital, Tbilisi, in the late 18th century. So there are sometimes negative perceptions of Iran that still persist.
And politically speaking, what kind of an impact does this relative openness to Iran have on Georgia?
Well, one of the concerns is that Georgia's most important ally, which is the U.S., is a sworn enemy of Iran. Washington pumps a lot of money into supporting Georgia economically, so Georgia has to be careful not to make the U.S. uneasy by getting too close to Iran. One danger is that being too open to Iran could make Georgia appear suspicious in the eyes of Washington, for example, by becoming a transit route for goods and people from Iran. But on the other side, there is also danger that if there were to be a conflict between Iran and the U.S., as America's closest ally in the region, Georgia could become an easy target for an Iranian strike, for example. So for Georgia, it's really a delicate balancing act to have friendly relations with Iran on one side, which is so nearby, and at the same time stay close to the U.S.
Marcus Meyer, thanks ever so much for joining us. That's it for this edition of Focus. Do stay with us here on France 24. More news coming up very shortly.
Watch all of France 24 on France24.com. It now features more content and is quicker and easier to use. 24 hours a day, wherever you are, visit our website and catch up on all the latest news. Watch the channel in high definition. Pause live TV and watch programs from the past 24 hours at the click of a button. Find our reports, programs and web documentaries in seconds. All of France 24 in French, English and Arabic on France24.com.
Messi?
Hey, kid.
Kobe Bryant?
Would you like to have some ice cream, young man?
Ice cream?
Cheer.
The best fly with Europe's best airline, Turkish Airlines.